think that consumers should be able to be measured. We should be able to understand where our money is going, where our investments are going into. Unfortunately, I think that are based on the information that we know from the work that we've done at AIMM, is that the majority of data providers today are providing information to marketers that is incorrect. They're providing information to marketers that state that their data is 95% correct, whereas the majority of that data is actually anywhere between 24 and 48% correct, which means that the attribution for growth is being given to the general market and by default white non-Hispanic segments, which means that then investment continues to go into the general market. So what needs to happen first is, yes, we should be able to measure everything. We should be able to measure every consumer, and we should be able to give attribution to the consumers who are giving growth to those brands. But instead what we're doing is that we are giving attribution to the white non-Hispanic segment, and hence continued investment continues to go into that. And we are still at a 6% or 7% investment in multicultural today, even though those segments make up over 40% of the population. If you add LGBTQ and people with disabilities to that, it's well over 50% of the population. And when you add the investment of LGBTQ and people with disabilities, you add about an additional 2% investment into that. So 8% investment for over 50% of the population, it just doesn't make sense. But the bottom line is that when the measurement is not there for those segments, then the investment isn't there. Because the attribution isn't there either. So it's a vicious circle. So the answer is yes, we should be able to do that, and we should be doing that today, but it's not happening.
So it's interesting that you say that the investment's not happening. There have been a couple of big announcements from media agencies like GroupM and others in terms of their commitment to investing in diverse media. Do you think that that's just lip service, or are we starting to see the dollars flow?
I hope it's not lip service, because we're certainly very far behind. We've been tracking it for a long time, and we haven't seen an increase in that. There have been companies and media companies that have announced an increase in minority-owned and minority-targeted media. We're hoping that they move forward with that. The challenge that we've heard is that there's not enough inventory to invest the amount of money that they stated before. So there's been a little bit of peddling back for some of those entities and saying, we're going to invest 10%, we're going to invest 5%, we're going to invest. But the problem is that there's not the inventory because the investment has never been there. So again, it's the same vicious circle that we were just talking about before. If there's not a history of investment in diverse platforms, then of course there's not going to be the opportunity to invest in content, right? So I think, P&G was talking about today that one of the things that they're doing is that they're investing in the creation of new content, so that as we move forward, there's additional content for companies like P&G to be able to invest in. So instead of saying, well, I can't invest all this amount of money, so I'm just going to invest a percentage of the content of the dollars that I thought I was going to do, why not go ahead and invest that full amount? But instead of investing it in the media dollars, invested in the creation of content and investment of voices behind the camera, so that eventually that inequality that exists in the entertainment and marketing industry dissipates, and we can finally find that equality that we're looking for.
So the investment is the one piece, but then kind of back to the start of that cycle that you mentioned is the measurement and being able to make sure that you measure and capture the engagement of diverse audiences. Have you seen any developments on that side of the space?
Well, the engagement is one that, from our perspective, we created a proprietary algorithm called CIM, the Cultural Insights Impact Measure, where we measure the impact of culture in both advertising and programming. We've conducted over 500,000 ad evaluations, and we've tested over 650 programs, and we've measured the impact of culture in both. And what we've learned is that culture is more powerful than we ever thought before. It's actually responsible for over 60% of a campaign's success and over 40% of a viewer's selection in programming. So folks are looking to not only see themselves represented in ad and in programming, but they're looking at them to see themselves represented in culture. So they don't want stereotypes, they don't want casting and just a brown face or a black face. They want to see themselves culturally respected in accurate ways. They want to see themselves reflected, celebrated. They want to see themselves empowered. They want their children to be able to see themselves and say, I want to be that person when I grow up. And unfortunately, that's not something that we see often enough. We heard the story of the little boy in Encanto who saw himself reflected and got so excited. And the only reason he got excited is because he had never seen that before, right? So if that was something that we saw readily on camera, that he would have just seen it and said, oh, that's cool, but he wouldn't have gone so excited. That wouldn't have gone viral. It went viral because we don't see that every day. I hired an intern right now who is gay. His family was forced to move from one state to another because he was abused, and and they had to move to a more embracing a place. And when he went to this new state, he saw a billboard from Delta, and it was two gay men. And he looked at that and he said, oh my gosh, I'm at a place that welcomes me, and here's a brand that is speaking to me. And that meant so much to him. So when we talk about like, why does it matter? It matters because people who feel reflected, people who feel included notice, and they pay back by being loyal, and they pay back by feeling included. And we're at a time in our society where consumer expectation is higher than ever before. They're expecting brands to deliver on inclusion. They're expecting brands to share their values. And if they don't do that, then consumers are looking for other brands that do.
It sounds cliche, but representation matters, right?
It does matter.
How do you feel like that conversation is? Do you feel like the conversation around diversity, inclusion, and representation is being had here at CAM?
You know what? I was just at the meta stage, and I was saying that the places where I'm seeing inclusion are the conversations where we're preaching to the choir, where folks are talking about inclusion, and it's Black, Brown, LGBTQ talking about how we need to do have to have a higher level of inclusion in the advertising and marketing industry. When I go to conversations where there are other conversations being had, I don't see the level of inclusion that I wish I saw at Cannes. And that I think is unfortunate, because if this is the biggest stage and the biggest celebration of the advertising and inclusion, or of advertising, then there should be a higher level of inclusion and a higher level of celebration of diversity. And yes, there are conversations, I think, greater than that have been at Cannes on DEI, but you can't have the conversation of DEI when you don't have the diversity present, right? So let's have those conversations with that diversity present.